Welcome and thank you for joining us. You are listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about something that probably lays just underneath everybody's skin, but perhaps we're not quite aware of, and that's emotional charges. You ever find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you just feel this certain jolt, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, frustration, you name it. There's a whole myriad of things that cause us to feel emotionally charged in ways that we react to the outside world, sometimes a little more spontaneously than we need to. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is author of the book, Loving Yourself Free of Charge. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Miss Adara Andriana.
Adara Andriana, nice to meet you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, this is an interesting book just by simple, sheer effort of how you produced it. Tell us why you decided to go this route.
Well, you know, I have to say, if your audience is spiritual, it's a spiritual story. I didn't decide. My story is the divine did. The first time I wrote this book, I wrote it about what I learned from my near-death experiences, and I was still functioning as a licensed psychologist, and it was 231 pages. There's a power failure, and I lost everything. I hadn't backed it up accurately. So it took me 2 more years. I rewrote it. This time it was 131 pages, went away for New Year's, came back, and storm front as a result of a Pacific Ocean hurricane came in 3 waves and took out 3 electronic copies and 2 hard copies when the ceiling crashed from water. So I lost the book twice.
Oh, boy.
And when I was standing in the foyer and I was like, God, give me a reframe, because I was starting to feel a little bit like Job, I heard very distinctly, divine edit, and I just started laughing. And I got moved to Sebastopol, and the house I'm living in is the gatehouse of what was the Charles Schultz estate, and the form the book is in now is one I would never have imagined. All of that intellectual stuff got distilled down to 16 insights on one page with a facing cartoon on the next page and a story corner that shows what happens when you apply those insights and when you don't.
Now, it's interesting because, as I was mentioning about how the book is laid out, is that typically you see books, especially when it comes into the realm of, personal empowerment or self-help, whatever you want to categorize it as, and they spend 200 and some odd pages telling you how to achieve whatever the goal is that the title promises you. Now, you kind of jump into it again with sort of a cartoon approach, and to me it seems to be more of a direct way of saying, here it is, which to me seems more highly effective than the old way of doing things.
Well, thank you. That was my thought. I mean, I have to tell you, it has been a labor of love. It's been 7 years and $70,000 in the process of creating this book and the website that's hosting it. Yeah, to get it distilled. And what I realize is all the content that was in those far lengthier 30 and 40-page chapters is all there in that single page. So it's pretty amazing.
Now, let's talk about what this loving yourself free of charge is. See, now a lot of people would take a look at that and go, oh, free of charge, but they don't probably initially understand what that really means. Talk about that.
Well, what a great question. If anybody listening to the show or you sitting in your chair there, love, has any place in your body you go, oh, this is just the way I am, someplace in your body where you carry tension, where you're habitually tight or contracted, stiff, okay, that's a place where you have stored charge. And how that got created is you had some traumatic moment in your life where what was going on in that moment you were not willing to allow. You labeled it too much pain, too much grief, too much unknown, too much fear, too much anger, too much something. Sometimes, interestingly enough, even too much joy, okay? But you said no, and the energy, which if it had been allowed to move, like everything else, can express as a wave. And emotional energy is meant to express as a wave. So when we block something and we say no before the wave has finished itself, the rest of that energy in physics is called potential energy. And what happens is the only way we can say no to an experience or a feeling is tensing something in our body. That's how we shut it down. That's how we numb, okay? So when we tense that muscle, the rest of that energy that would normally have moved through if we'd allow it gets stored behind that tense muscle. And over time, if you don't come back and make the choice to say, well, now I'm willing to feel it, and most people don't know they should do that, right?
Right.
It stays there, and then what happens is, because your body mind is so brilliant and it wants to be healthy and whole, it will attract to you the same kind of situation. It's not to punish you, and it's not karmic bad thing. It's meant to give you a chance to go, okay, now I'm ready to feel it. But we haven't been taught that. And so it comes again, and we go, oh, I still don't want to feel it. What happens? Now there's even more charge behind that block muscle. And the consequences of that kind of stored charge, range from unhappiness and inability to manifest what it is that you really want to in your life, recurring patterns that happen over and over again, but most importantly, physical and emotional and mental disease. Because if you take your hand right now and you make a fist, and we ask the listeners to do the same thing, just close your fingers down just as tight as you can. Everything. What's happening? What's happening to your hand right now? Tell me.
Being kind of cut off.
Right. What color? Don't loosen it up yet. What color are your knuckles?
White.
Exactly. So, and you can let it go now. So what happens when we tense, every place in our body where we're holding tension like that, those contracted muscles actually close down the veins and arteries. The lymph can't flow, the blood can't flow, can't get oxygen, and on a more spiritual level, you can't get prana or energy, chi, either. Okay? Now, what do you think that means? It means anything in that contraction or just downstream from the blood flow perspective is going to end up not getting the oxygen and the energy that it needs to be healthy.
Oh, now it's interesting because especially when people who decide to become treated for addictions, for instance, one of the things that come up during perhaps a course of a person going through this process is they talk about what is the charge or the feeling that you have that causes you to use. And we tend to actually do that, find something outside of ourselves to bring in to perhaps soften the way that we feel about a particular circumstance, regardless of what it is. It could just be a memory for the most part. In fact, it seems that's what addictions mostly do, is they kind of soften those old memories. Talk about how something like this can actually begin to help people turn those around and maybe not have a reason to use things such as alcohol or drugs. Well, in fact,
it's interesting. You what a brilliant question. Boy, you're 2 for 2 so far. Because one of the 5 long-term effects of built-up charge is frequent numbing, which shows up in any one of 20 different kinds of addictions: food, alcohol, sex, gambling, drugs, whatever you can think of. Because the question is, what are people numbing? And if the difference, and people say to me, well, what's the difference between numbing and not numbing? Well, you're numbing when your motive, it's not that any of those things are bad things. Sex certainly is a wonderful thing. The question is, what's your motive in reaching for it? Right. So if I'm reaching for a Snickers bar, my lover, or a whiskey, and my motive is, I just felt something I don't want to feel anymore, I'm numbing. If I'm reaching for a Snickers bar, my lover, or a whiskey because, boy, that really would taste good to me right now, I'm enjoying myself, if you hear the distinction. So all the numbing behavior is about avoiding pain. And guess what that pain is? It's blocked emotional charge. So learning how to love yourself free of charge is actually getting at the root cause of 98% of the addictions that are out there.
Wow. And that's just it. You take a look, for instance, I remember some time ago people who had been through, for instance, a 12-step program. And,
right.
Well-intentioned, meaning well, and it does work and it does help people. But one of the things that I found interesting is that there was a frustration with people being labeled alcoholic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's fair enough. Okay. However, once you quit drinking, you're still an alcoholic. And I thought, well, that's kind of self-destructive, because it's letting somebody know that there's just no way out of a particular situation they put themselves into.
Right.
How then do you find any healing through a situation like that? And I say to myself, no, you're an alcoholic if you use alcohol, but if you stop, then you're not. It's just that simple, it seems to me. And it makes you successful. And you certainly want to move in a direction, for instance, that makes you feel that you have sort of emotional command, if you will, over the ability to feel. And this is what you're talking about here in your book.
Yes. Now, what you just brought in, and I won't spend a long time here, but because I was a licensed psychologist, although that's not what I'm functioning out of right now, because I found simpler, more direct ways that are outside that paradigm to help people make the shifts. But I have that training and that background. What can happen with alcohol? The alcohol is the form that you happen to use to numb. You can actually develop, a body addiction, and that can be a genetically biased thing to do. So, when you start dealing with drug and alcohol addictions, what can happen is you've numbed so often with that substance, you now have biochemical stuff you have to deal with, as well as the charges, the reason why you were doing it in the first place. But having said that, even if you handle the biochemical side, if you haven't cleared the charge that's the reason someone was numbing in the first place, you'll see people do substitute addictions. They may be a perfect 12-stepper with their alcohol, but all of a sudden they're compulsive with their sexuality, or they're working, or they're gambling.
Or they're chain smoking and drinking
Right.
lots of coffee.
Exactly.
Oh, these are safe. They're legal. Well, so is the alcohol kind of thing. Now, what I like about your book is how you lay it out. Again, as we mentioned earlier, it sort of has it has a cartoon approach, but also you have stories in here. And it's interesting how you lay those out, because you'll put out a scenario that's the same, yet there seems to be two different outcomes. Talk about that.
Well, and in fact, one of the stories, I can't remember which story it is. I think it might be Fred and Gina and Harriet and Ian. One of the stories, I'm actually showing the difference between a choice that is an addictive choice as a result of numbing pain and something that's actually a free will choice. So if I was going to do a quick one, I could read from the book around insight number 5, the story corner that brings insight number 5 alive, and what insight number 5 is about the long-term effects of charge. So this is Fred and Gina's story. Fred pulled himself up to the mahogany bar, signaling for the bartender. What a lousy day, Fred thought, remembering his boss announcing the next round of layoffs. His belly tight and his breath shallow, he called out, "Hey, I need a drink over here." So, and next to him, the little cartoon character is saying numbing choice. Why is that a numbing choice? Because his motivation for drinking is to forget the lousy day. He's wanting to numb out the fact that he's actually anxious, and probably underneath of that scared and maybe angry. Now the next little story underneath, the story continues, and it says, on the next stool, Gina gave a relaxed smile down into her margarita. What a treat, she thought, sipping the frozen light green drink slowly. I've always wanted to stop in here and try one of these. Okay, so it's making the point that nothing that we use to numb is the issue. The issue is what's your motivation for picking it up.
Ah, very good. Now, I know that in your book that you lay out, as you mentioned, just one of them, core insights. Talk about some of the other core insights that you share with readers in your book. Well,
I would say probably if I had only one that I could share, the first one that I would share would be I dealt with a series of near-death experiences, and I had actually a spiritual awakening in intensive care in a hospital, and some of what I'm sharing in this book is what I was shown and what I used to survive a mutated staph that I caught, that at that time, there is now, there was no, the staph had mutated past that current moment of Western medicine's ability to stop it, okay? And so what I was doing 20 hours a day was following the pain around my body and clearing charge out of my body, clearing charge out of the cells of my body. Now, because the staph ate its way actually through my belly in several places, and my belly couldn't be stitched up. It had to be allowed to be granulated in. And I was open to the air, in several spots of my body for 6 months. Well, I caught 7 other different kinds of infection. So my healing process has taken years, and for many of those years, all I had the energy to do was to sit in a chair and clear charge. Now, that means I've done this millions of times, and I'm very Forrest Gump. When you do something millions of times, you finally figure out the chutes and ladders. You can cut away what's irrelevant or the beliefs you have that aren't necessary, and you get to the core. And the insight I want to share is having found so many specific instances where I blocked specific emotions, and there were stories about specific traumatic moments in my life, and it's very easy to get caught in that story and that detail. But if I function in that way, then clearing charge takes a long time, right? What I started noticing was that every one of those charges had 2 key things in common. And if I would take a chute right to those 2 key things, 80% of my charge would clear without my needing to go into the story. So you want to hear what those 2 key things were?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's what in the book I call a superordinate yes. It's insight number 7. And a superordinate yes, what I realized is every charge in our body is a map of where we've said no to life, to our feelings, and our authentic experience. That's what charge is. Okay? It's a map of our no's. So I realized that I needed to find a yes that was a higher level yes than my individual yes and no's of preferences, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And the only yeses I could find that could hold every single traumatic moment that was coming up for me to clear were these 2. First, am I willing to love myself right now? And am I willing to be in the truth of my authentic experience right now? And when I found it, if I used love and truth like a compass to navigate my life with on a moment-to-moment basis, that I could clear every charge in my field. If I would return to the no and say, I am willing to love, and let me say this is not woo-woo or theoretical. The most basic form of love is acceptance. So if I'm willing to get in the vestibule of love by accepting my experience, let me stop on that for a minute. There's some things to accept about ourselves that are really hard that I've had to accept in order to still be alive. Like, I can be a bitch. That's just true. There are times I'm angry. That's true. There are times I'm hateful, stingy, everything. There are also times I'm magnificent and wildly generous. All of that lives in me. So being willing to accept the fullness of my humanity and the truth of everything I actually experience as a human being, that's what sets you free and literally allows the energy to start moving so it doesn't have to stay behind the block. You can move it out of your body.
You know, Adair, I was just thinking about something. I remember, and this happens quite frequently, I think, with all of us, when there is a bad time that happens, and you see somebody just not having such a good day, and you say, what's going on with you? It seems to me like you're a little bit off today. And then you hear them say, well, it's a long story. And I always say to them, no, it really isn't. It's a lot more shorter than you think it is. It's just most of it is how you're reacting to what happened. So what happened? Well, it was this. And then they go on to explain away what it actually was. And I'm thinking, so you're trying to kind of take a position to be right here. Is that what's going on here? Instead of just saying, yeah, this happened. And it's amazing that we kind of kick into that sort of a survival mode of self-righteousness. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but being right. Why is it that we do that?
Well, I will tell you, and actually, interestingly enough, it is another one of the insights in my book, and that insight has to do with. Let's go back to what this is all about, because it's really important we not make ourselves wrong or make anyone else wrong. We create charge because in a moment we think we're going to die if we feel what we're feeling one more second. I mean, we create charge because something just feels too much, for us. It just feels like something we can't possibly handle, Okay, so having said that, and I got so into that compassionate moment, I lost where I was going. Refocus me.
Talking about the story around a situation that had occurred, and why we have to try to put ourselves in a situation where it almost seems like survival, I think.
Okay, so if we recognize that we say no to something because it's an intense pain we don't want to feel, okay, it's too much, and it's stored in our body. Now the next thing we need to know is our body wants us to make a new choice and to let it flow and move out of the body. Why? Because as long as that charge is there, whatever part of the body is holding it is living a half-life, not getting enough blood, oxygen, lymph, energy, any of that, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a vested interest in releasing it. Well, how that vested interest shows up is you attract people to you that trigger you. Well, they're triggering you. The reason you're getting pissed off, frustrated, irritated, angry, not peaceful, judgmental, is because they've triggered your charge. If you notice, when something happens you just calmly don't agree with, you can actually observe someone. I'm going to use a word I don't know how cool this is to say on radio, but you can calmly observe someone being an asshole and you don't have any reaction to it at all. Mm-hmm. You're observing, you're in discernment, you're in witness. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when you have that reaction, that trigger, that judgment, that anger, that hurt, that sadness, that whatever, it's a signal that it has touched someplace in your body mind where you have stored charge, and that's actually what you're feeling. Isn't what happened with the person, but what you're feeling inside. Now, here's the answer to your question. Long lead in for this pitch. Why do we want to put it on someone else? Because we have such a vested interest in not wanting to feel the pain. So we have an illusion that if I run my energy, in insight number 10, I talk about running your energy horizontally versus vertically. What most of us have seen, what we see if we turn on the TV and look at any soap opera or any movie, is a bunch of people running their energy horizontally, meaning what I'm feeling is your fault, okay? Mm-hmm. And the solution to this, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling, so the solution to this is to make you wrong and trying to get you to change. Okay? That's why we're so invested in making the other person wrong, because we don't want to come home and feel what we're feeling. If, on the other hand, the minute we get triggered, we realize, now this is a total reframe, but I'll tell you it works. If we actually look at that person in our mind, we don't have to say it out loud, and say, wow, thank you for being the jerk that just triggered me, because, right. I now have the opportunity to take my attention off of them horizontally, sideways, between me and you, and put all of my energy vertically in my own body. And I bring all of my attention, my awareness, my love, my breath to what's going on in my own body. Gee, what happened when they said that? Where did I get tight? Bring my awareness there. I'm willing to accept what's here. I'm willing to let myself feel it, and then you'll be amazed what starts coming up, because energy will come up. And then what I talk about is that the healthy way you clear and move charge is vertical. When you run your energy vertically, the word you doesn't even come out of your mouth. It's all I'm feeling, mm-hmm. And then I move the energy. I cry, I laugh, I breathe, I dance, I stomp, I write, I draw. I do whatever I need to do, okay, to move the energy. And how do I know I'm clear? It's so simple. It's too bad we human beings didn't come with an operating system, whatever, guidebook manual, or whatever. Yes. Yeah, a little manual. Yeah, it's so simple. If you're not feeling peace in the body, you've got charge. The minute the charge is cleared, guess what you feel in your body? Relaxed and peaceful. It's not an intellectual process. It can be very quick, and it's very visceral, very embodied.
Well, I certainly agree with that. It's interesting. I remember a friend many years ago was talking about a Chinese ideal of the mirror, and the idea that life is reflecting who you are. And, at the time I really didn't understand that too much, as much as I at least do this day and age. But it's funny how you still feel those jolts, how somebody will do or say something and cause a reaction within you, and you go to yourself, I can't stand being around that person, when in fact what they're actually doing is reflecting who you are. Otherwise you wouldn't have a response as you were saying, to do that. So now, when a person has this particular charge, whatever it may be, now, what are the steps to do to be sure that they can kind of go into it, I guess, learn the lesson and release it?
Well, in my book, I talk about the 7 steps to untying the knot, okay? Because every charge in the body is a knot of no. You know, somewhere you've said no. Remember the 2 things about, am I willing to love myself now? Am I willing to tell myself the truth now? The knot of charge gets created when you say, no, I'm not willing to accept what I'm experiencing right now. I'm not willing to feel this. I'm not willing to, right? And no, I'm not willing to express my authentic experience right now. And those 2 no's are the 2 ends of the ropes that tie the knot of no. So how you turn it around is 7 simple steps. The first is to notice when you're triggered and accept that it means you have a knot of no somewhere. Okay? Mm-hmm. The second is you breathe and scan your whole body for the key indicators of charge. And in the book, in the second insight, I talk about that charge will always show up with certain things. Your breathing will get shallow. Your body will be tight. Those are 2 key things to look for, tightness in the body and a difference in your breath. The third step, so simple. When you find, where you're tight, where you're holding, or where you're feeling pain, where you're feeling a tightness, bring your breath and your attention and focus on that place. The fourth step, go into your superordinate yeses. Yes, I choose to accept, which is love, myself in this experience right now. And yes, I'm willing to be truthful about what I'm really feeling. Okay? And then the fifth step is very simple. Stop trying to do anything. Your mind can't do this. So stay in witness, have your inner eyes down, your inner ears down, have your attention on that place, and just witness it. Keep your breath and attention there, be in witness. Sixth step is the energy will want to move, let it, okay? Mm-hmm. If you feel, some of my friends laugh, but it's amazing. I'll get up and I'll make sounds like an animal. If something's happening, now I won't do this in public where people don't know what I'm doing, but some of my friends now know what I'm doing. I'll get up and I'll make sounds like an animal because I found I really just need to move the energy, okay? And inevitably then I end up laughing. I move the energy all the way through. It's complete. I've done something with it. I'm laughing. So I allow the energy to move, and the last step is simple but not easy. Acknowledge that it's moving and let it leave. Now, what that last step means is you ever go to the dentist, and the dentist drills a hole somewhere in your mouth, and that thing hurts. But the only way it hurts is when you put your tongue on it to find out if it hurts. So what do? You come out of the dentist's office, and you put your tongue on it, and you go, it hurts. And 5 minutes later, you're curious, does it still hurt? What do? You put your tongue on it, and you go, yep, it hurts. So the seventh step is simple but not easy. The seventh step is really let it go. Stop thinking about it. Don't write a story about just what happened. Don't recreate it by going, yeah, but I really think they were wrong. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Let it go. Drop the bone.
Now, you talk about what is known as a superordinate yes in your book. Mm-hmm. What is that exactly?
Well, the superordinate yes is what I was talking about before. It's the 2 yeses I found that were big enough to actually hold and transform every no in the body. Yes, I'm willing to love myself, and yes, I'm willing to tell the truth about my experience right now.
Ah, very good. Fascinating how, this day and age that we're moving into a realm, especially of brain science, that we're finding more efficient ways to just be better, more whole people and saying, who we are is perfect. It's good just the way it is.
Exactly. And, the whole thing, the reason the book is called Loving Yourself Free of Charge is I was doing this because I had a spiritual awakening and I was shown to do this as the staff was entering the cells. I would see little Groundhog Day movies mm-hmm. of a traumatic moment in my life that would play over and over again until I did what we just talked about, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that's all I did for a long time. Well, my purpose in doing it was that was all there was for me to do, and I was doing it to save my life. But the unintended consequence of it is exactly what you're saying. I noticed that every time, I'll give you a key one. My mom was really brilliant, and my dad had tons of street smarts. And I was very, very bright, Mensa kind of bright, okay? So I had a real identity around the polarity of being smart. So when I started realizing that all of this charge holds us in a limited identity, somewhere where we've said, I always need to be this and I can never be that, right?
Right.
And a key one for me was I really had an attachment, an identity to being smart. And it had really paid big benefits in my life. I'd been a major corporate executive. I'd had the six-figure income, I could function with it. So when I had this aha and I hit this moment in my life that came up in a point of my body where I actually made the choice, I always have to be smart. Nothing wrong with being smart. And it came for me to actually say, okay, am I willing to move into my wholeness, which means accept the whole thing? I'd have to be willing to accept that I can also be stupid. And my authentic response was, but I don't want to,
Right.
I don't really want to be stupid. And so and you can't fool the body. If you aren't authentic in your willingness to embrace whatever's there, your body knows and nothing moves, okay? So I had to meditate on it and actually come up with how could being stupid be an experience that I would ever really be willing to have? Because I really didn't see it, okay? Mm-hmm. And that one took me a couple of months before I got it. And in meditation one day, I got shown, and it was so clear, that if I wasn't willing to ever be stupid, there were two key experiences that I couldn't have easily. And one was learning, and the other was having fun. And the truth is, I'd had a life that didn't have a lot of fun in it because I was so busy being smart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what I realized was, without exception, every time we open up and we clear out one of those no's. Now, is it my preference to be stupid? No. Okay, but when I'm having a stupid moment, and I had a surgery a little while ago, it had an unintended consequence of setting up this funny thing in my brain, and there'd be this electrical stuff, and all of a sudden I couldn't think. So I actually have discovered if I'm not resisting that experience, it's like, okay, well, right now, that's how I am. That's how that's what's going on for me. Mm-hmm. And it actually became funny. Okay?
You bring up something that's interesting. I remember, and it hasn't happened too much, at least recently, when I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking. Inevitably, I'm going to have one of those stupid moments where there's an accident, Yeah. And what's funny is at first, you get irritated. Oh, I spilled the gravy all over the floor. It'd be just something ridiculous. Maybe
right.
You took a shortcut and it caused you to go the long way, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, it started becoming comical to me because the moment would come, but I would never know what it was I was going to do that was going to be stupid in the first place. But when it did, all I could do was laugh going, there's that moment,
Well,
and after a while, it just stopped happening.
That's what happens. What happens is that's a mark of acceptance, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm accepting that is it in truth a preference for me to be that? No, it's not my preference. But I can accept it. And what I noticed, and that's where the book title comes from, what I got, and the largest inadvertent gift I got from doing this for 7 years was I am so free. And people comment on it. I feel free of social norms. I feel free of a lot of my own programming. I feel relaxed and peaceful and free to be who I really am. And boy, that's a pearl beyond price. That's an amazing thing, and that's what you get out of doing this work is you come to peace with being the wholeness of yourself, and you're also free to express and experience all of what you are.
The book is Loving Yourself, free of charge. Our guest today, Adara Andriana. Is there a website people can find out more about this?
You bet. It's rainbowcreators.com.
Well, that seems simple enough to me. Adara, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. Again, the book is Loving Yourself Free of Charge, and believe me, you can certainly do that. Our guest today, Adara.
RainbowCreators.com in the Rainbow Shop.
RainbowCreators.com, exactly. Thank you again for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.